After hearing my words, Alara paused for a moment, then suddenly burst into laughter. As she laughed, she said in a contemptuous tone, "Thaddeus, if you were truly sorry and willing to accept punishment, I might reconsider my opinion of you. But by lying everywhere like this, you only make me despise you even more." Alistair chuckled from the side. "Thaddeus, Alara is so busy, yet she took the trouble to come to this remote island to see you. She's already given you face. Why are you telling such obvious lies? Who do you think you can marry? Are there any village girls here? Besides," Alistair glanced at my legs with a mischievous look in his eyes, "you look like you wouldn't even be married to a village girl." I remained silent, staring at them without responding. 3 years ago, Alara was kidnapped. I risked my life to rescue her, but she ignored the blood on my body and forced me to save her assistant, Alistair. When I returned to the scene, I was suddenly knocked unconscious from behind. As I was losing consciousness, I heard a voice that sounded like Alistair say, "Break his hands and feet. Let's see how he dares to compete with me after he's crippled." In the end, I was thrown into the sea and drifted to this island. I once harbored resentment and dissatisfaction, but over time and with the help of those around me, I gradually recovered. Now my heart is at peace, and I no longer dwell on the past. As I was preparing to leave, Alara grabbed me, furrowed her brows, and said, "Alistair is going on a business trip to Myanmar before May Day. You must go protect him and ensure nothing goes wrong. If you do a good job, I'll let you come back. You can choose to be my bodyguard or driver. If you're a driver, you'll get to see Alara every day." Alistair teased. "Thaddeus, don't think you can marry into the Carrington family just because you helped Alara a few times." I pulled my sleeve out of Alara's hand and said again, "I'm already married, I won't go with you." Alara suddenly became agitated and slapped me across the face. "Thaddeus, do you really think that's funny? I've been very lenient with you. Last time you didn't save Alistair in time, and he had to see a psychologist for a long time. I didn't blame you, but you're still gloating." Alara's nails left a bloody scratch on my face. She paused for a moment as if she wanted to touch me, but I pushed her hand away. The ring on my finger fell off, and I hurried to pick it up, but Alara was faster and accidentally stepped on it. "You even bought the ring already." Alara looked at me with a complicated expression. "Did you know I was coming? But Thaddeus, I've told you before, we can't be together." I was at a loss for words. At the time, Alara's father had two requests for me on his deathbed. One was to help Alara become the CEO, and the other was for me to marry Alara. Reginald had been very kind to me, so after some consideration, I agreed. So I proposed to Alara, but she coldly mocked me, saying I couldn't even afford a decent ring and wasn't worthy of proposing to her, and that I was just a bodyguard for the Carrington family. I didn't mention it again and quietly supported Alara, helping her avoid the power struggles within the company. Eventually, she became president. However, Alara gradually grew accustomed to my sacrifices and became increasingly arrogant. The friendship we once shared had long since faded into insignificance. "Don't move. That's the ring I was going to use for my wedding with my wife," I shouted. I rushed over to grab the ring, but Alara kicked it into the sea. I was furious, clenching my fists. Alara looked up at me. "Don't even think about it. Tomorrow is my father's anniversary. You're coming back with me to pay respects to him." At the mention of Reginald, my steps faltered. 3 years had passed. It was time to go back and take a look. Upon returning to South City, I found that many places had changed. At Reginald's grave, there were people I didn't recognize. They must be the new recruits Alara had trained over the years. Strictly speaking, Alistair's people. Everyone addressed Alistair with great respect when they saw him. Alistair constantly gave orders, directing this person and that, acting like a master. "Thaddeus, go stand at the back." He pointed at me with a smile that seemed insincere. Based on their positions, everyone here was company executives, and I was just a bodyguard, the lowest-ranking person present. I didn't argue with him, feeling the disdainful glances from those around me, and simply walked to the back. I had come here only to light an incense stick for Reginald. As a way to express our old friendship, Thaddeus, an elderly man with white hair, stepped out of a black Rolls-Royce, excitedly calling my name. I rushed over to help him. "Gideon, how did you come here?" Gideon warmly shook my hand. "It's Reginald's 7th anniversary. I had to come personally to see you all. How have you been?" He looked at Alara in the distance and asked with a smile, "Have you two gotten married yet? Do you have children? Back then, Reginald treated you like his own son-in-law." I was at a loss for words and tried to explain. Just then, Alara glared at me angrily. "Thaddeus, you're so unpredictable. I invited you here to pay respects to my father. Yet you went out of your way to bring Gideon along and publicly pressured me into marriage. I've already told you, I can never marry you. Just give it up." "Alara, how could you say that?" Gideon was taken aback. I smiled bitterly, pulled Gideon aside and shook my head at him. In the distance, Alistair kept staring at me with a cold gaze that made me uncomfortable. After the memorial service, I left alone and returned to my home in the southern part of the city. It had been 3 years since I last returned home, and the place was covered in dust. I gave it a quick cleanup, then knelt before my mother's portrait. I told her about the past few years and showed her the marriage certificate, letting her know I'd found a good woman and that the wedding would take place at the end of the month, so she could rest assured. Just as I finished speaking, the electronic lock in the living room beeped and Alara walked in. She casually asked, "Is the password still my birthday?" Before Alara was promoted, she often faced harassment from her rivals. Feeling insecure and heavily reliant on me, even the password for our home's electronic lock was her birthday, so she could find me anytime. I hadn't had time to change it this time, but it didn't matter. I planned to sell the house anyway and never come back. "Is there something you need?" I frowned and asked her. "You're supposed to accompany Alistair to Myanmar tomorrow. I won't hold you accountable for calling Gideon back today to act with you. I'm not going," I said and went to the bedroom to look for something. "Thaddeus, what kind of attitude is that? Have you forgotten how you promised my father to take good care of me?" Alara's eyes turned red. "You're so ungrateful. In the past, whenever she cried in front of me, I would help her without hesitation. I whispered to her, 'I've helped you 3 times. The first time was when I broke my right leg and had to wear a cast for 3 months. The second time was when I was bleeding and had to stay in the emergency room for 3 days. The third time, I drifted at sea for a day and night and suffered severe injuries. I have already repaid Reginald's kindness.'" After I finished speaking, Alara seemed a bit dazed. I took out a jewelry box from the drawer. This time, besides telling Mom about my marriage, I also wanted to find this. The ring I had ordered fell into the sea, and it was too late to order another one. I felt that ordinary rings available on the market weren't good enough for Serafina. So I thought of the ruby ring my mother had left me, which she had said was to be passed down to her daughter-in-law. I opened the jewelry box, but it was empty. "Are you looking for this?" Alara suddenly raised her hand, and on her finger was the antique ruby ring. "This is the ring my mother left for her daughter-in-law. Give it back to me. I'll give it back to you tomorrow when you accompany Alistair to Myanmar." Alara turned and left, leaving behind a single sentence. "Thaddeus, I need you to prove your loyalty so I can keep you by my side." The next day, as Alistair was preparing to leave for Myanmar, Alara came to see him off. Alistair ruffled her hair and then wrapped his arms around her waist. The two paid no heed to those around them, their intimacy appearing natural. I stood quietly behind them until Serafina called me on video. My expression softened instantly. I stepped aside to answer the call. "Brother, are you at the airport? Where are you going?" Serafina immediately sensed something was wrong. After I told her where I was going, Serafina grew concerned. I reassured her, telling her to stay in Switzerland with Grandma and that we'd meet at the island wedding in a few days. Serafina reluctantly hung up, and I was still smiling when I noticed Alara giving me a complicated look. "Thaddeus, were you on the phone with your wife?" Alastair said provocatively. Alara sighed and said, "Thaddeus, you really don't need to do this to get my attention. I've already told you, as long as you stay with Alastair and complete this mission, you can come back to me." I didn't bother saying anything else and boarded the plane directly. In Myanmar, everything was going smoothly, and Alastair successfully handed over the project. On the way home, he needed to walk through the Golden Triangle region. As we walked through the jungle, Alastair was always ahead of me. Suddenly, he let out a loud scream at a corner and disappeared. When I rushed over, I accidentally stepped on a trap, causing intense pain. Meanwhile, Alastair was standing nearby, casually crossing his arms and watching me. Clearly, this was a trap set specifically for me. Furious and in pain from my injured foot, I charged at Alastair and punched him hard, knocking out several of his teeth and causing him to bleed from his mouth. He was both shocked and frightened, stammering, "You hit me so hard you broke my hands and feet, Thaddeus. You really haven't learned your lesson." At that moment, a group of people rushed over to attack me. Just then, around 20 skilled individuals emerged from the woods behind me, quickly standing by my side and swiftly dispatching Alastair and his men. "Thaddeus, sorry we're late. The young lady was worried about you and sent us to help." The black-clad men bowed to me. I nodded, then everything went black, and I fainted. When I came to, I found myself in a hospital in South City. "Thaddeus, what happened? I told you to protect Alastair and you let him get beaten like this." Alara stormed in angrily. I was woken up by the commotion and opened my eyes to see her being held back at the door, shouting at me. Before I could say anything, someone stood up beside me. It was Serafina. My expression changed and my face softened. Serafina walked up to Alara and suddenly slapped her across the face. "You woke Thaddeus up so loudly. You know what Alastair did to Thaddeus? Thaddeus is injured, and I spent so much time taking care of him to get him better. You let him go to such a dangerous place. He could have been hurt again." Smack! Serafina slapped Alara again. I had only ever seen Serafina as gentle and obedient before. This was the first time I had seen her act so decisively. Alara covered her face, completely stunned. I got up from the hospital bed, and Serafina rushed over to support me, looking concerned. "Brother, don't move. The doctor still needs to examine you." I smiled at her and shook my head to indicate I was fine. I walked up to Alara, my expression turning cold. I reached out and said, "Take back my mother's ring. Give it back to me." Alara froze. "But you said it was your mother's ring for her future daughter-in-law." "Yes, it was for my wife, not for you." I took the ring and said, "Go investigate Alastair. You'll find out why he was beaten like that, and make sure to check your employees and the accounts." Alara saw Serafina helping me out and suddenly became agitated. "Thaddeus, are you playing games again? Did you bring these people here just to make me angry? The eldest daughter of the Van Houten family isn't someone you can just invite over. Find out what's going on before you speak." The black-clad man blocking her said coldly. I left everything behind in the southern city and returned to the island with Serafina. Though this island is remote, it's where Serafina and I first met. So we decided to hold our wedding here. Unexpectedly, Alara also showed up on the wedding day. She held a USB drive in her hand, tears welling in her eyes. Staring intently at me, in front of all the guests, she shouted, "Thaddeus, you can't marry her." After not seeing her for a few days, Alara looked much thinner. "Today is an important day for Serafina and me, and I really don't want anything to ruin it." "Lara, what are you trying to do?" I took her to the beach and asked her seriously. "I repaired the surveillance footage from the hospital before my father passed away, and saw that he really did say he wanted me to marry you." Alara held the USB drive tightly and said softly, "I had just returned from abroad when I heard about my father's passing. I was deeply suspicious, feeling that everyone was hiding something. When you told me, My father's last wish was for us to marry. I thought you had other motives. So all of that is in the past now, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I interrupted her and said, there's nothing else to discuss. I'll leave now. As I was about to walk away, Elara suddenly hugged me from behind and burst into tears. Thaddeus, I don't want you to get married. Don't marry her. These past 3 years you've been gone. I've felt so empty inside. Actually, I've always liked you, but I cared too much about what others thought, afraid they'd laugh at me for liking a bodyguard. But now, there's nothing standing in our way. Thaddeus, come with me. Since my father wanted me to marry you, I'm willing to marry you. I smiled softly and gently pried her hands off my waist. I don't want this, Elara. I'm already married and my wife and I are very much in love. Today we're having a wedding ceremony. If you're not here to bless us, could you please leave? I turned and walked away. What I didn't know was that after I left, Serafina emerged from the woods with a warm smile on her face and said to Elara, my husband's words were clear. Elara, please go back. Elara looked at Serafina, who was wearing a white wedding dress, and clenched her teeth, saying, do you really think Thaddeus likes you? We've known each other for years. He's always been by my side, giving me whatever I wanted and doing his best for me. You're just a tool he uses to comfort himself when he's feeling lost. He's always loved me. Serafina's expression grew cold. Today is my wedding day, and I'm in a good mood. I don't want to dwell on the harm you caused Thaddeus in the past. However, from this day forward, I will never allow anything to harm Thaddeus again. Serafina and I got married as planned. We had completely forgotten about Elara, our eyes fixed only on each other. When I was severely injured at sea and on the brink of death, I happened to encounter Serafina's ship. She saved me, summoned the best doctors to treat my injuries, and personally cared for me with great tenderness. Later, I noticed her gaze often lingered on me and she would blush whenever she saw me. Gradually, I was moved by Serafina's gentleness and deep affection. Serafina not only made me feel physically comfortable, but also brought a long-lost warmth to my heart. Serafina and I lived a simple life on the island until she nervously told me about her family background before our wedding. It turned out that the Van Houten family was a prominent clan overseas, with extensive business interests and influence. As the most cherished granddaughter of the Van Houten family, Serafina was the apple of everyone's eye. Learning about Serafina's family background left me both surprised and somewhat relieved. Although Serafina has a simple and cheerful personality, her knowledge and manner of speaking clearly set her apart from the average islander. Serafina was actually very worried that her family background might put pressure on me and make me unwilling to be with her, so she never mentioned it. I told her that I love her for who she is, and if there are any difficulties with her family, I am willing to face them together with her. To my surprise, the Van Houten family was very friendly. After meeting me, the elderly patriarch of the Van Houten family highly appreciated my character and abilities, and valued my loyalty and sense of duty even more. Thus, Serafina and I's marriage was smoothly arranged. Since Serafina's grandmother was not in good health, she returned home to accompany her for a while, so our wedding was postponed. Now, standing at the altar, I carefully placed the wedding ring my mother had left me on Serafina's finger. We kissed each other. Serafina whispered in my ear, Thaddeus, I have a secret to tell you tonight. I smiled and replied, we've already gotten married and held the wedding. Aren't you going to change your words? Serafina paused for a moment, then, though a bit shy, called out directly, husband. In the crowd in the distance, Elara stared intently at us embracing on the stage, her eyes reddening. As the wedding banquet was about to end, Serafina and I stepped down from the stage to thank the guests. At that moment, I noticed Elara mingling among the crowd. Among the joyful crowd, her pale face stood out, drawing everyone's attention. I didn't want her to affect Serafina's mood, so I decided to go over and ask her to leave. Serafina wrapped her arm around mine and said, let's go together. When we reached her, Serafina said, "Elara, this island is now my private property. Please leave us." Lara looked at me firmly and said, "Thaddeus, I will wait for you. You are currently captivated by what is before you, just as I was once moved by Alistair's kindness, which blinded me to my true feelings. I will wait until you understand your own heart. I have never been this clear about my own feelings. Being with Serafina is the happiest time of my life." I stared into her eyes, my tone clear. Something seemed to break in Elara's eyes. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, and a large sign fell from above. I acted quickly, grabbing Serafina and dodging out of the way. I heard Elara's screams, "Thaddeus, come save me!" Serafina and I finally reached a safe place. Serafina immediately checked me from head to toe, her face filled with worry. "Honey, are you hurt?" I told her I was fine, but Serafina wasn't reassured and insisted on taking me to see a doctor. Elara was lying on the ground. The sign had hit her, and the sharp metal edge had cut her leg deeply, exposing the bone with blood flowing nonstop. She looked at me sadly, perhaps thinking of all the times before when she was in danger, and I would always rush to protect her first. This time, she finally understood that she was no longer the person I needed to protect first in my heart. Serafina was furious upon recalling Elara's earlier plea for help. She ordered her men, "Quickly take her off the island by speedboat. My family doesn't welcome someone who makes my husband risk his life for her." Elara tried to say something, but I didn't look at her. I simply took Serafina and left. That night, we returned to our wedding chamber. After bathing, Serafina noticed the old scars on my body and nearly shed tears. She said, "Seeing the injuries you suffered to protect her, I wish she could suffer just as much." I gently stroked her long hair and comforted her. "These wounds have healed. They don't hurt anymore. When I was a child, I was always with my mother and often bullied by others. Reginald gave us a safe haven, and in a way, the person I am today is greatly influenced by him. So, considering Reginald's kindness, I don't want to hold a grudge against Elara. However, now that I've repaid all the favors he did for me, how she lives her life from now on is none of my business." Serafina lay quietly in my arms and said, "Husband, I have a secret to tell you. Actually, I saw you when I was a child." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "When I was a child, my parents and I went to South City for the first time. I was being mischievous and ran off, accidentally getting lost. A really handsome older brother saw me crying and came over to comfort me, staying with me until I found my parents. I said I couldn't walk, so he carried me on his back and even bought me ice cream. Were you that little girl?" I vaguely remember something like that. "Yes. At first I thought you were a bad guy, so I even bit you," Serafina said shyly. I touched the small crescent-shaped mark on my hand and smiled. "You were like a little fierce dog back then. You were such a little thing." Serafina lunged at me but was pinned down by me. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly intimate. Meanwhile, Elara returned to South City and received a call informing her that Alistair, who had been in a coma at the hospital for a long time, had woken up. Last time in the Golden Triangle, Alistair had been severely beaten by Serafina's men and had been in a semi-comatose state ever since. Now that he had finally regained consciousness, Elara rushed to the hospital. Upon seeing her, Alistair immediately began complaining about how I had framed and betrayed him. This time, Elara didn't comfort him as she had before. Instead, she coldly asked Alistair what really happened in that kidnapping case 3 years ago. Alistair froze, clearly not expecting Elara, who had always been obedient to him, to ask that suddenly. "While you were unconscious, I asked the people who went to the Golden Triangle with you. They said it was you who told them to attack Thaddeus, and mentioned wanting to torture his hands and feet. Now you're telling me it was Thaddeus who was bullying you. 3 years ago, you told me the kidnapping was Thaddeus's plan. He deliberately had me kidnapped so he could rescue me and make me grateful to him, to get revenge on him. Even though I knew he was severely injured and had lost his limbs, I chose not to save him and haven't spoken to him in 3 years. Alara looked at Alistair. Alistair, which part of what you said is the truth? Can I still trust you? Alistair's expression grew complicated, and he finally decided not to hide anything anymore. He gave a dark smile and said, "The kidnapping 3 years ago was my doing. I originally planned to rescue you myself, so you'd be grateful to me. But Thaddeus rushed in and ruined my plan. I had to change my plan on the spot, telling you I was trapped inside so Thaddeus would come to rescue me. Anyway, I'd always thought that besides Thaddeus, he's always been protecting you, which has affected many of my plans. I had planned to have someone break his limbs and throw him into the sea, but he was just too lucky. Alara, do you really think I want to grovel before you every day? If it weren't for wanting to get my hands on your shares sooner, you—" Alara didn't wait for him to finish. Rushing forward angrily and grabbing his neck, Alistair's face turned bright red, and he could barely breathe. At that moment, several bodyguards rushed in and dragged Alara away. Alara looked at the bodyguards who had always protected her, yet now obeyed Alistair's orders, and was so angry she couldn't speak. Alistair coughed loudly and said, "I thought that once Thaddeus, that nuisance, was gone, you would marry me. But 3 years have passed, and you still can't forget him. You even made excuses to go to the island to see him. I planned to lure him to the Golden Triangle and dispose of him, but it doesn't matter now. Alara, we're getting married, and you'll hand over all the Carrington family shares to me. As for Thaddeus, he beat me so badly, I won't let him off easily." Alistair ordered that Alara be locked up, ignoring her objections. A month later, when I heard that Alara and Alistair were getting married, I was at the hospital with Serafina for a checkup. Upon hearing the news that Serafina was pregnant, I was so happy I lifted her up. Serafina's face lit up with a brilliant smile. On the large screen across from the hospital, news of the Carrington family's heiress marrying her male assistant was being broadcast. On the screen, Alara looked calm as she walked arm in arm with Alistair. Alistair was dressed elegantly, looking like a member of the upper class, but he limped slightly as he walked. His leg had been injured in the previous attack. I only glanced at the screen before looking away. My mind was filled with thoughts of Serafina and the unborn child. Since Serafina planned to go to Switzerland for childbirth and to stay there long term, she suggested we return to South City first to pay our respects at my mother's grave and share the good news with her. After preparing everything, we flew back to South City. Serafina bought flowers, visited my mother's grave, and spoke to her at length, assuring her to rest in peace and that she would take good care of me. I said I would never be alone again because I had her and our little one as my family. Hearing this, I felt a bit moved, tears nearly welling up in my eyes, and I hugged her tightly. Finally, we returned to the apartment where I had once lived with my mother. Serafina said she wanted to see the place where I used to live. After settling Serafina in for the night, I went to the bathroom to shower. Suddenly, I heard Serafina scream. I rushed out and found the bedroom empty. Then I received a call from Alistair. "You want to save your wife? Come to the rooftop, but come alone." When I arrived at the rooftop, Alistair was drunk, holding Serafina by the neck, standing on the edge of the 20th floor, swaying back and forth. "Thaddeus, what makes you better than me? How did you manage to marry the eldest daughter of the Van Houten family? And why does Alara still think of you after I married her?" "Alistair, come down and talk to me. If you have any grievances, just say them." I was worried he might hurt Serafina, so I tried to reason with him. "Of course I have grievances," Alistair exclaimed. "I've always supported Alara, but all she cares about is you. I married Alara and gained the Carrington family conglomerate. This should have been the pinnacle of my life. Instead, he grabbed Serafina by the neck and said, 'Because your wife's people broke my legs, I'm now a cripple. The journalists are mocking me, and the company employees are gossiping behind my back all. Because of you too.'" Alistair slammed a sharp knife onto the table in front of me. "You like being a hero, don't you? If you use this knife to blind yourself and become a cripple, I'll let her go. I bent down to pick up the knife. Husband, I won't let you hurt yourself. Serafina's voice was sharp. I looked at her. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears. I gave her a subtle wink. Serafina suddenly realized something. At the same time, I threw the knife at Alistair with all my strength, hitting his right eye. Alistair screamed in pain, covering his eye with his hands. And Serafina took the opportunity to break free from him. I rushed forward and caught her securely. Serafina was terrified and clung tightly to me. I hurried to take her downstairs to check if she was injured. Alistair, who was lying on the ground and nearly dead, suddenly pulled out his knife and stabbed me in the back with all his strength. Thaddeus, watch out. A figure rushed over and knocked Alistair away. The knife pierced Alara's heart. Her face turned pale as she looked at me. Thaddeus, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you before and did many things that hurt you. I hope you can forgive me. Also, I hope you live well, she said, looking at Alistair with anger in her eyes. Alistair stripped me of my power in the Carrington family, controlled me with drugs, forced me to marry him, and took everything my father worked so hard for. Now I have to settle the score with him. After saying that, Alara suddenly hugged Alistair and jumped off the 20th floor rooftop. 10 months later, Serafina gave birth to twins in Switzerland. We have been living in Europe, living comfortably and peacefully. Every year, I return to South City once to visit my mother's grave and also pay respects at Reginald's grave. Sometimes, I also place a bouquet of white flowers at Alara's grave.